Good evening, everyone. Let's call the 11th regular meeting of the Board of Directors of School Administrative District number 52 to order. We'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Tammy.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're going to start off tonight. We typically approve our minutes by unanimous consent or help discuss our comments, but I want to start with a motion to rescind our approval from the 9th regular meeting, the minutes from January 11th, 2024, to rescind and strike those minutes and replace them with a revised set of minutes that you have in your packages tonight. So I'm putting that motion on the floor. Is there a second? I'll say Kyle, and discussion. So I'll start off by explaining why we're doing that. I think particularly we had a discussion around policy ACAA at that meeting, which, if we recall, was an acknowledgement of the first reading of that policy. And then we took several motions of both receiving feedback that we wanted to consider and voted on that feedback. We also decided via motion and vote that we would send that feedback back to the policy committee for review, and then voted to formally acknowledge. The minutes, I don't think perfectly reflected that. And I think even in the meeting itself, when we were going through, I don't know if the motions, while we took motions and voted on them, the motions weren't necessarily as specific as they perhaps should have been, that they were motions to amend that acknowledgement. Okay. And so just to be clear on this process as we move forward and to reflect really the intent of what we were doing there, I just want to be clear that when we have these motions to acknowledge, I think what we did was correct at that meeting. We discussed comments and feedback. We decided as a group that we wanted to officially review that feedback. And so that would occur by making a modification to the acknowledgement or amending the acknowledgement motion. Okay, so we had a motion on the floor to acknowledge. We amended that acknowledgement to consider certain points. We further amended that acknowledgement to send it back to the subcommittee for specific review. And then we voted on that full acknowledgement as amended at the end. All right. And so that really is kind of cleaning up kind of the minutes in that way, which again, you have both in your packages what the minutes said about that, and then the revised minutes, they're strict and revised in red. So with that, I'll open up to questions or further discussion. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, we can move to a vote to approve the minutes, the revised minutes. It's unanimous. We then moving on to the 10th regular meeting minutes from January 25th. Is there any thoughts, comments, or feedback on those minutes? Seeing none, those are approved by unanimous consent. Okay. Glad to clean up the minutes. One more piece, it's into my board report now that I want to clarify, and that was also around consent agenda. And a good example of it was when we were reviewing policy ACAA back on the 11th. That was a unanimous recommendation by the policy committee. It was in the and therefore we put it in the consent agenda. I think I have mistakenly discussed how easy it is to pull things from the consent agenda in the past. And I think we've been operating that way. But really reviewing the policy, actually trying to make sure the minutes were correct and reviewing the policy, I realized there is no need to vote to pull anything out of consent agenda. That's correct. And there's no discussion allowed about you just either do it or you don't do it. And any member can make a motion. The only thing we didn't do is have that motion get seconded. And I just want to be clear, every motion that is made still needs a second. And that ultimately, when we do decide to pull things from the consent agenda, any member can make a motion, but we do want to make sure we're getting a second. And I've certainly not been diligent enough to make sure we're getting seconds on those. So, but I just want to be clear that I will, moving So hopefully that's clear. Any questions or thoughts? No? All right, so moving on to public comment. To be clear for everyone, our board meetings are conducted for the purposes of carrying out the official business of our schools. It's important to note that meetings of the board are open to the public, however, they are not public forums. At each full meeting of the board, time is allocated to provide opportunities for citizens and employees to express opinions and concerns related to the matters under consideration by the board. These comments shall be within the guidelines set forth in policy BEDH, public participation at board meetings. Copies of that policy are on the district's website. I just want to highlight the following points from the policy. That is, the chair is responsible for recognizing all speakers. We ask that speakers identify themselves by sharing their name and town of residence, and each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes to express their views. Speakers should direct all comments to the board, specifically the board chair. This is an opportunity for the board to listen to the opinions of the public that relate to the school and education matters. It is not intended to be a conversation or a debate of issues. We know that the school-related issues can be emotional, but we ask that civility is maintained. We will not permit profanity, gossip, defamatory comments, shouting at one another, or comments that disparage or attack individuals or groups. The board is faced with many important issues, and so for the sake of efficiency, the board discourages duplication or repetition of comments. The board will not permit complaints or allegations against staff members. We certainly care about these concerns, but they are personnel matters, which the board is not permitted to hear in public. There are complaints against staff. These will be handled appropriately through our complaint policy, KE. And just to reiterate, this is just a highlight of key points. Please refer to policy BEDH for a complete description. With that, do we have anyone who would like to speak? Yes, go ahead.
Michelle Nicholas from Green. An internal Meta presentation from 2021 found that children on Instagram and Facebook were frequent targets of unrestricted sexual harassment, according to a lawsuit filed this December. The lawsuit alleges that Meta's platforms recommend sexual content to underage users. The report estimates that on these platforms, 100,000 kids per day receive images of adult genitalia and other sexually abusive content. CEO of Meta was embarrassed into offering an apology to the victims of his greed, saying, "It's terrible. No one should have to go through the things that your families have suffered." The hollow words of a billionaire after the fact of his increased wealth at the price of children's safety are unfortunate for our future. Put quite simply, regardless of the age of consent, children cannot consent in any meaningful way to sexually explicit images, especially if they are unaware of such content. The definition of sexually explicit, unlike the definition of child pornography, does not require that an image depict a child engaging in sexual activity. And as minors are not capable of giving consent to possess or transmit sexually explicit images, how can they be offered these images without the consent of their parents? Who is responsible when, not if, sexually explicit material finds its way out of a tween's hands and into those of young children? Will we again suffer the paltry, meaningless rhetoric of smug pseudo-apologies as we did for depriving children of adequate air? "Oh, I'm so sorry that such and such happened to your child, but we need to keep all children safe." Is it going to be business as usual and harming one group to protect another? How do you put a value on a child's sexual exploitation? Can content that reportedly saves lives destroy lives as well? Or are we to believe that the value of said content may only be elevated and revered, never to be questioned? Community standards dictate that we shield youth from obscene and sexually explicit content. Such material is connected to a lower age of sexual activity and a higher rate of sexual abuse. And how is this abuse of content such a boon to any community? Would this not be the discrimination of lowered expectations? It is an epitome of insult that several members have openly and publicly repudiated. I call upon the board to unanimously support the amendments written by Director Anthony Shostak. These amendments respect community standards, place power back in the hands of parents where it belongs. But most importantly, these amendments protect all children of MSAD52 by placing obscene and explicit content outside the parameters of our selection process. In doing so, we can ensure that families in this district do not have to endure our CEO's after-the-fact apology for the suffering of our children.
Thank you very much. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Michelle, please. So I too hope that the board is going to consider, the adoption of policies being have stricter guidelines on sexually explicit material. Because if you think about it, what are you actually going against? You're saying that children can have sexually explicit material if they are other than straight. So that right there is making a protected class of people. And I, for one, if one of my kids decides that they want to be gay, this is the last stuff that I think that they should be reading. Okay, so how many signatures, how many parents, how many people do you want? You want to gauge the town? I appreciate the board for allowing us more time to do so. So I'm just wondering how many, how much time do I need to spend? I spent the last 2 weekends walking around Leeds and talking to people. I talked to 124 people and only 8 people didn't want to partake in signing for whatever reason. Some people, they had their dogs barking, they were talking between a screen door, and they just didn't want to be bothered on a Sunday, right? So I have 116 signatures myself, 116. I never went, it was, well, every 19 doors I knocked on where one person didn't want to partake for whatever reason. Okay, I didn't get into it with them. So I'm just wondering how much more time, how many more doors do I gotta knock on? Because at this right here is more than a 92% rate that our community wants better standards. A lot of these parents didn't know about this stuff until I told them. And they asked me how, why, and I made sure I told them that this is being brought in by the school and there's board members that know fair well of what's in this stuff. And when parents bring it up at board meetings and public comment, they shut us down and don't want to hear about it. They do not like hearing that stuff, so how much more? Do I knock on another 100 doors? And if it's another 92% and I check my work, is that fair enough? Do I have to go to Turner and Green myself and knock on 200 doors to see if it's a 90% rate? Will our community want better standards? They want better standards. 1 out of every 20 doors I knocked on just didn't want to partake. They were very pleased when they saw me coming and they realized, because they see this stuff on TV and they feel like they're alone, they don't know what to say. I talked to one teacher in Leeds, and she said that she can't even talk about this stuff for fear of being outed or losing her job. She signed the petition. She's on here. I have lots and lots of names. I myself am going to get way over 200 myself, and I'm going to make sure I count every door I knock on so I can gauge it, whether it's 10%, even if it's 85 to 15. That's the community standard we want better for our community. So I hope that you consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Childs. Does anyone else like to speak? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Moving on to communications. I do not have any this evening. How about you, Carrie?
So I'd like to report one resignation, Regina Hutter, Special Ed Tech 2 at Turner Elementary School. Following transfers, Rebecca Alvarado, Special Ed Tech 3 at Green to the Intervention Ed Tech position at Green. Jenny Meisner, Food Service Assistant at Turner Primary, is transferring to Food Service Assistant at the high school. And then we have the following new hires. Jeffrey Bennett, Custodian, district-wide, and maintenance is fully staffed. Not one opening. Just want to say that. Tracy Roberts, Food Service Assistant at the high school. Heidi Bang, Special Ed Tech at the middle school. Elizabeth Davis, bus driver, transportation. And Rain Gowie. She told me you were, go. Sorry.
I thought you were gonna say your name tonight. I would have prepped you better.
Office support. She introduced herself and said she was related to you. I was like, okay, I gotta get that right. Office support assistant at the high school. 3 new subs. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Adjustments to the agenda. I think you'll see a few highlighted in red here. Some of these came just an hour before the meeting, so I'll just highlight them quickly. And, there was a change or adjustment to the PTB meeting time. I'll let Peter announce that when he gets to his report. We also wanted to make sure our student representative report got in here. And that ended up renumbering or relettering, I would say, a couple other items. But otherwise, we already talked about the January 11th minutes. So it's pretty much what you've seen for the week here. So getting into committee reports, speaking of such, Crystal, Finance Committee.
Yes, we met this evening. Our first item on the agenda was discussing potential grant opportunities for a generator at high school, looking into that, Kelly and Gabby. The second item was solar contract banked credits, and we're just reviewing the current contract that we currently have with our company. Third item was an extension of the wastewater treatment plant bond and discussing potential avenues for that. And then we reviewed our financial reports and we reviewed and signed payroll. It was a light evening.
Very good. Very good. Moving on, plant transportation and building, Mr. Ricker.
Yes, we met on the 2nd. This was basically solely around the wastewater treatment plant and proposals moving forward. Basically, the new treatment plant will be located on the ball field next to the central office. It was explained in detail, the flow and treatment options were described. The subcommittee gave conditional approval to the superintendent and finance director to continue working with Wright Pierce on this particular location and with the current method of using the current sluice system for final disposal. There was a brief discussion in researching more options of subsurface disposal. The primary problem there was a 1.5 to 2 year increase in the time frame of completion if we went this route, and that is even if this route could be used or if we could find a place to do it. Overall, I'd say the committee would almost prefer a subsurface option, but it was felt that the time frame was just too long considering the age of our current system. If all the applications continue to move ahead smoothly, applications like dealing with DEP and so forth, which we'll believe they should, then the project should be going out to bid sometime late this spring, hopefully around May at the latest, with some hope of the work being started by midsummer. With a realistic time frame finishing of sometime next year in 2025. We had a couple of the aspects of the proposal were discussed and that are not being considered by Wright Pierce, and the committee felt that they should be. Primarily, the committee felt that the existing disposal route needs to be checked and repairs, and hopefully I was taking the notes that the sluice way needs to be double checked as part of the whole project, as well as so if there are any needs to be done, it can be completed at the same time frame. Also, see if there are any options around central office that we can accomplish to improvements in the central office operations by putting in the plant. Funding, as we talked about, is still going to be a similar situation with the majority of it coming from the grants. And we as a committee did feel that probably we would have to look at increasing some of the, in the reserve accounts, some of the funding reserve accounts, primarily as a shortfall to cover any shortfalls where a large portion of this funding is coming from the federal government, as that money from the federal government has not actually been assigned yet or gone through the legislation. And so it's basically could be on hold depending upon the mood of Washington. So we feel that, and not only do we feel, we have to have that money available to cover whatever that time frame is before we get the money from the federal government. Other than that, we have 2 meetings coming up, as you see on your agendas, and there we go.
I'll just announce them real quick. That's
sorry.
That's all right.
My apologies.
February 16th, 2024 at 7 a.m. right at the administrative building, and also February 29th, 2024 at 5 p.m. And that one will be not at the administrative building.
Wherever the school board meeting will be.
It'll be at the school
Yeah,
board
it'll be the
meeting.
school board meeting that
No,
evening.
can't rattle it off my head right now.
So, but anyhow, curriculum and policy, Ms. Johnson.
Yeah, we met tonight and we had a meeting tonight based solely on maybe cleaning up some policies and deleting some, which is always fun. So we'll bring that to you later. We're still working on editing them. But on your agenda tonight, we have, on the consent agenda, there's KHC. So this is a brand new policy. When we were looking at GBIA, which is, staff participation in politics, this was referenced in it, and we thought it looked like a good policy, so we pulled it out and decided to review it. When we had this meeting, we were just lucky, a bunch of the administrators were present as well. And they all said this actually reflects current practice in the schools anyway. And they all supported the adoption of the policy, and it was voted on unanimously as a committee. So that's that. And then we also have the second reading of ACAA, and Carrie will be speaking on that when that one comes up on the agenda.
Moving on to Tri-Town Education Association support staff negotiations, Jessica.
We met this week. I think things are going well. We have pretty much TA'd or laid the groundwork for some good TAs in most all of our combined issues or interests. The areas that we have left are really around a lot of the financial pieces, and so I think we're in a good place. Our next meeting, I believe, is scheduled for the 27th of this month. We're still working.
Okay. Thank you very much. And moving on to our student representative report, Sydney.
This last week, the 8th graders came up to the high school and were given tours and a little bit of a presentation about what they would be offered next year as freshmen. And we also have had earlier this week and then next week, some of the state champion, the boys track. I think football is going next week to the State House. And indoor track has KVACs coming up.
Big deal. Going to the governor's office. Moving on to our administrators this evening, we have the principal from Willamette Area High School, Principal Shaw.
Good evening. A couple of updates for you, staffing updates. You just heard we have a nominee for our office support assistant. We will be starting to post for an open world language position right after our break, in a couple of weeks. Hopefully get that filled for start of school next year. As Sydney pointed out, we had 8th graders visit last week, and additionally, we had our 8th grade parent night last Thursday night, where 8th grade parents and their students came up and we talked 9th grade year with them. They took their tour of the building as well. Winter Carnival is next Friday, which is always a big deal, and is going to be quite seen next Friday around Belvedere High School. Over vacation on the 20th and the 21st, we'll be hosting Winter Academy for students who need additional academic support. And then on the 5th of March, the Key Club will be hosting their annual blood drive. So lots of stuff going on. The winter season is wrapping up. Unified basketball has a couple more weeks to go. We recently had the musical one-act plays are now up and going, and they're competition in March. Additionally, the math team is also in season. So lots of stuff happening.
Pretty good. It's hard to believe the winter is wrapping up.
Yes.
But it sounds like it is. Also tonight, Green Central School Principal Parker.
Good evening. In addition to the information on my submitted board report, I have a couple of additional interesting pieces. We have 5th grader, her name is Sophia, and Sophia kind of took it upon herself, realized that there's a frequently used bathroom near the cafeteria. She felt had really used some sprucing up. So she coordinated with Kara Getty, our GT teacher, created a written proposal, came to me, did a whole presentation about her thoughts on the ways that she could kind of spruce up the bathroom, maybe make it more positive, more inviting, and completely diagrams the whole bit. So I said, well, let me look into that. So I met with Mr. Coburn and consulted with Ms. Med, and we were able to get that project greenlit. So Mrs. Getty is working in coordination with Sophia to do some of the painting, designs, and a whole bunch of really interesting ideas. So I really appreciated the power of even one student. So I wanted to share that with you. The other thing that is not on the board report is next Friday, the 16th, we have our annual Students versus Staff Floor Hockey game. I have it on good authority that there will be players from the CMCC hockey team there to help one of the teams. We'll leave it to the board to figure out. So, are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we also have the Turner Elementary School principal, Principal Levesque. Well, and thank you for letting us in tonight.
Yeah. So we already hired her, but our nurse will be starting on Monday, which is super exciting for us. We've had some people fill in for the past couple of months now, so just waiting for her certifications. We're really excited about that. Carrie had mentioned it as well, that there are a couple of subs starting in the district, but more importantly for me, one of them is starting for TES, so we don't really have subs, so it's a big deal. And then last Wednesday on the 31st, I think that was Wednesday, we had our second annual TES Got Talent. So we had kids presenting, we had a mime, some kids doing some soccer drills, gymnastics, singing, dancing, comedy, and there were 3 winners from there, so it was pretty fun to watch. Our 3rd student newsletter is going to be going out tomorrow, and the group, most of them don't watch football, but they made bets anyways on who they thought would win the Super Bowl. So that's very exciting. They didn't know what some of the words were, so we had to kind of explain like what a running back is, but they wanted to do it anyways. They knew about Taylor Swift. And then we have our own little winter carnival next week on Friday. It's just, I would say, like, from living it last year, it's very loud, but the kids have a lot of fun, so it's great. And then we do a spirit week as well, so there's like a theme day every day.
Questions? Okay. And last but not least, our Director of Special Education is Drysdale.
And that's way back here. Yeah. All right, so on your board report, I indicated a big celebration. I think it was even in 2 sections that we have 11 out of our 12. But you can see it's filled with either long-term subs and a tutor, education technicians. So it's been nice to be able to have staff to be able to meet the needs. It's beyond nice. Reworking schedules as more staff come on, be able to make sure that we're meeting our obligations for students. We're also working on planning our next PD day on March 15th, looking at, we're partnering with a company called To Teach, which is out there more in the western part of the country, but really starting to talk about what are our roles as ed techs, what are our roles as special ed teachers, and really starting to look at inclusive practices and strategies for our professionals in the department. We're also getting ready today. We were given 1 week's notice, but I was able to reschedule our DOE audit on-site visit. It was a little dramatic and shocking to know that we had a week to gather material that we needed to gather. Our staff had already done audit themselves, and so they were ready to go. But gathering all of that material was a lot right before, in a hectic time during the school year. So we rescheduled that to the Thursday after February vacation. And we're also going to be able to bring some of the main DOE representatives that are giving our people to some of our programs in the district. So we're looking at our investment program, and then also our functional support program teams. Be able to have them see that and give us a little bit of feedback on that as well. And then we're getting ready, our Inclusive Leadership Committee is getting ready to read The Way to Inclusion by Julie Clausen and Kate McDowell and other authors as well, to be able to start our work with that I had mentioned during the presentation with UNF, partnering to look at our special education project, look at the practices, what's going well, what are some areas that we can improve, so we can have our students with disabilities included within their classroom. Are there any questions?
I'm just curious about the timing of some of these 11 of the 12 positions that are filled. Is that since the beginning of the year, or is this kind of slowly been filling throughout time, or was it like a big chunk just recently? Or
We have been slowly filling them over time. There are some schools that had been filled with substitutes earlier on in the school years that have been very helpful. But then also, as we've been getting more substitutes, we've also been able to fill some of those vacancies. They're still posted positions. They're still available for employment. But we do have people that are willing to come in and work with us every day. And another piece to that is also looking at being able to work with them to also gain their ed tech certification. So we're having conversations with them about that as well. I know Amy Pelletier is, and I know our principals and our staff are recruiting through substitutes.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the CDS impact? So you mentioned it on the back of this, and I have been hearing some buzz about some changes that are likely going into effect. I didn't know if you could speak to that or what our district's contribution is going to be.
Well, so I think what I had shared with you on the form is what we are gathering information. What we're hearing is being gathered by the governor, the commissioner, to be able to respond, to be able to provide services to 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. Through this process, we are looking at where our ears are definitely ground, and we're talking about funding, what the funding would look like, how much funding we would be receiving, because I think that is going to be, I think, the sole driver of us being able to support students that are 3 and 4-year-olds. What we're kind of hearing at this point, and what I had shared in there, is that CDS is going to remain intact. And how I'm trying to kind of put my head around this, I think it might be similar at first, certainly, to our special purpose private school model, where we case manage students, myself and my assistant director, but we're going to be looking at, through the budget process, special education leaders at the elementary level to help us to be able to do that work. And then if I had my brothers, I certainly want to establish our relationships, because we do have 4-year-olds already attending public school that have worked through CDS, and then slowly absorbing those, and then being really entered into conversations with families for 3-year-olds, and having us talk about what that will look like for public school as well. Not necessarily bringing 3-year-olds into public school, but really what's our obligation and faith to be able to provide services to them. And when you're looking at 4-year-olds right now, our faith obligation is 2 days a week provided to those students. For 3-year-olds at this point, through special education, our obligation would be 6 hours. So that would be certainly that we have be definitely different than what you have now for 4-year-olds for special education. So we're constantly, we're doing a lot of talking about it, but I think once we get some numbers and what that would really look like, and once we get numbers, will we be one of the 1/3 that would start this year, or will we start the following year, or the year after that? But it's really, when they talk about a 3-year phase plan, they're really talking about district third of district volunteering, another third, and another third. I think we're fortunate in this district where we've really established principals, and our school communities have established strong partnerships. We have partnerships with Woodford, we have partnerships with Ron Murphy, and then other related contracting providers. So I see that this would be another partnership that we would enter.
So just to clarify, we don't really know what's coming our way federally as far as funding, but it sounds like we're going to be talking about it during our budget process this year.
Well, it really just depends on what the legislature settles on. Like, I've been given numbers from the Commissioner of Education, but I don't know how real those are. It depends on what the legislature settles on, if they adopt the plan that the commissioner has recommended. I have no idea.
Getting
So,
really close to budget season, so.
well, my understanding is that the money would come on, right now, the recommendation is it would come outside of the 8279, that it would just be additional money, not run through the school formula. Whether or not it comes in enough time for us to think about how it would impact our budget, whether or not, you know, some of that elementary leadership that Rebecca mentioned could be in part funded by that. It's really hard to know right now.
Thank you.
So it's really a guess.
Peter.
Is the whichever point of the 3-year plan we are, is that still waiting up to the legislature?
That's the commissioner's proposal, so it's just whether or not they adopt, right? So it would be required by year 3.
Yeah.
But then voluntary, who wants to go in the first wave, who wants to go in the second wave, and then who's gonna wait and like be forced to.
So realistically, we could push it off for years, so see how other districts are making it work and so forth, and.
We could, unless it's beneficial for us to do that, and I mean, Rebecca's, I think we're committed to doing it. If it ends up being beneficial to us, then we certainly would pursue it. It's just a matter of the timing.
But how would it be, I'm just curious, I would want to hear what the benefits for us being on the lead compared to us, you know, maybe not wait until the end, but okay, let's take 1 year and see what other school
I think
districts.
it really depends on what the plan ends up
Yeah.
being, right? Without the legislator sort of deciding on what they're willing to fund, it's really hard to guess at this point. So we'd have to wait and see what that looks like and then say, yep, this is good for us to start now, or I don't understand that. Let's wait and see what happens.
So that'll all come back to us at a later time then?
Yeah,
That would
yeah,
proceed.
yeah, you'll have to. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. There's really nothing to do right now.
I just hate leading the charge sometimes because, you know, sometimes it's good just to one step back and see what the sacrificial people happen to.
The sacrifice of other people. All right.
That's a
Thank you, Rebecca. All right, moving on to our assistant superintendent, Ms. Gillis.
I am going to share my time with my report later, so no comments now.
Okay, sounds great.
Move to accept.
Superintendent report, period.
Yeah, so I have a presentation, so I'm gonna be quick though, because there is a process in Maine for Teacher of the Year, and it's an open process for people to nominate. Last year, we had 5 teachers nominated by mostly parents. In one instance, I think it was a student, colleagues. This year we had 22 teachers nominated. So I'd like to read their names because that is awesome. And it's in every single school, and it's mostly from parents. So the teachers at Green Central School who were nominated: Stephanie Stockwell, teaches 1st grade, Susan Smith in 5th grade, Gabrielle Pelkey in pre-K, the entire 6th grade team, Nancy Ellis, Tammy Anderson, and Karen Netto, and then a kindergarten teacher, Beth Brown. At Leeds, the awesome phys ed teacher, Tammy Scott, 3rd grade teacher, Ashley Gowries, special ed teacher, Darlene Rollins, and 5th grade teacher, Jude Lever. At TES, special ed teacher, Allison Rucci, 3rd grade teacher, Sam Albert. At Turner Primary, kindergarten teacher, Amy Duguay, 2nd grade teacher, Linnell Morin Towers, kindergarten teacher, Ashley Morneau, pre-K, Emily Libby, and 1st grade, Jolene Libby. At the middle school, Nadia Ryu, formerly as instructional coach at Leeds, is now teaching science and math at the middle school. Math and social studies, and I knew it wasn't math. Science and social studies. She's just too exciting. I know. At the high school, we had Caroline Labrie, the health teacher, and Lisa Bukowski, a special ed teacher. And we even had one of our adult ed instructors, Nima Musa, was also nominated. So my email was like out of control over the weekend because I get CC'd on all of them. So I was like, wait, I've lost track. And I was emailing each of them to congratulate, and I had to keep going through my email to make sure I'd gotten everybody. And then when I did that, I realized it was 22. I can't tell you how each of those teachers like to get that email, to just have it sitting there waiting for them Monday morning. And for me to see 22 teachers in our district where somebody took the time to shout them out, and whether or not they opt into the process or move forward, you know, I don't know. Some of them aren't eligible. They haven't been teaching long enough. So I've already heard from them like, you have to be a teacher for 3 years. I've only been here for 2 years. I'm like, well, you're crushing it. So keep going. So I was so excited. I'm excited for them, and I'm excited for us, because I think that's an indication that people are valuing the work that our teachers are doing, for sure. And then the only other thing I'll say is that on the consent agenda is the middle school assistant principal job description. It's updated. There are 0 changes. But we keep trying to plow through these job descriptions to make sure they still accurately reflect what people are doing.
Great, thank you very much. Which takes us to our consent agenda. Again, these items will be acted upon collectively, unless a board member asks that a specific item be acted upon individually. Item 8.1 is consideration of curriculum and policy committee recommended first reading and acknowledgement of the new policy. It is 8.11 KHC, distribution of non-school materials. Jamie spoke on this earlier in her report. Item 8.2 is review and adoption of superintendent recommended job descriptions. 8.21, assistant principal at the Tripp Middle School, which Carrie just touched on. So is there a motion to act on these items? We'll say it was Bree and seconded by Anthony, and all those in favor. Approved unanimously. Our next item is old business, and that is item 9.1, which is a second reading and approval of curriculum and policy committee recommended revised policy ACAA, harassment and sexual harassment of students, and regulations ACAAR, student discrimination harassment, and Title IX sexual harassment complaint procedures. Is there a motion for that? Tammy, and seconded by Kyle. Discussion. Now, if you recall, this was what we just talked about in our minutes earlier. There were specific items we voted on, points that we raised to be reviewed by subcommittee. I don't know, as chair, Jamie, if you want to speak to some of that.
Sure. In my report, I said that Carrie was going to speak to that.
Oh,
so
well.
I'm going to delegate my time to Carrie.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Carrie, if you'd like to jump in.
So if you want to get out the regulations, I'm going to walk through it. I think, you know, in reflecting on this policy is very substantially different from the one that we considered several weeks ago that was around the drug and alcohol tobacco. And we got a lot of information from our school counselors about what the laws are in terms of what students can consent to and what counselors are by law need to report or not report. This policy is actually very, very different from that. And it's very heavily regulated by the federal government. So, and there aren't necessarily laws around privacy and sharing information. The laws are very specific around procedures when there's a report or a complaint around sexual harassment or some kind of racial discrimination. So it's actually filled with lots of communication with families. So I just want to walk through that with people so they can see. So the first part of the regulations are for discrimination, harassment, that's affirmative action, usually deals with race-based issues, but also gender identity. So on the page 2 in B, the list of what constitutes sexual harassment, a lot of those things that are in there would fall in our obligation as public employees as mandated reporters. So certainly sexual assault, domestic violence, where students are the victims of those things. Mandated reporter laws require us to report that. There's very few instances where we wouldn't tell a family that we've done a report to DHHS. The instance that I can think of is if the parent is themselves the person that we are reporting on. So these are all things that the vast majority of them would be things we would need to report. When we get into the complaint procedure, which starts on page 3, A1 talks about our obligation as school employees. We're required to promptly report if we see anything that's covered under this policy, either discrimination, harassment, sexual harassment, whatever that may be. and that we're obligated to report that to the Title IX Coordinator, Affirmative Action Officer. That person in our district is Heidi Poulin, who's the Director of Guidance. If you turn the
She's in the
page,
big.
yeah, sorry, if you turn the page to page 4.
4:14.
4 of 14, yes,
Yes.
sorry. I'm in the regulations.
We're in R now.
My bad.
Yeah, no
Yeah, we're in the regulations. 4 of 14. Number 6 on that page requires us to notify those who've made a report that they have a right to go to the Human Rights Commission, that there's legal obligations there. So that's something that we would not notify parents of. Like, minors can't consent to like that legal notification. That legal notification is something we would have to make with families. If you go to B1 in terms of complaint handling and investigation, the Title I coordinator is required to inform me when a complaint has come in. So in terms of, Peter, your question around like a check and balance almost, right? If parents aren't notified. So in this policy, parents are a part of this the entire time. I talked with Heidi Poulin and confirmed all the training she has done requires parents to be a part of this conversation. And there's so many requirements for our notification here that's really an obligation. But I also am the check and balance for Heidi doing her job to make sure that she's complying with the law and that the notifications that are required by this policy are made. Number 2 talks about an informal resolution. If an informal resolution is reached, it requires notification following laws. If number 2, an example of an informal notification talks about ordering a no contact or changing classes. Let's say it's an issue between 2 students and one student's harassing another and we change those classes. We can't do any of that without parents knowing. Like we can't do that without parents being a partner in that. So the students who's accused would know, and the student who is reporting themselves as the potential victim would need to know. And this policy is very, very strict in terms of how you need to communicate with both sides, the student who's making the complaint and the student who is being accused of violating this. So we have to do both.
And that would include both sets of parents, I would.
Absolutely, yes. Because when you read through the procedures, like they're so complex that there's just no way that you could not involve families, and Heidi confirmed that both families need to know those things. So if you turn the page, an example, number 7 near the top, in terms of the complaint process, the complainant and the respondent may suggest witnesses to be interviewed or submit materials that would require that partnership with families. These are all things that a minor wouldn't know to do, wouldn't understand to do that. And then number 11 is that requirement of a written report and findings. That written report would have to be provided to families. We can't mail a written report to a student. It would have to go to the homes of those families. You look, C1 is again that check and balance. The Title I coordinator has to consult with me concerning that investigation and findings, so I can look to make sure that the investigation has followed the laws and the steps that are required, and to make sure that those findings were appropriate given the investigation. If you go to number 3 under that, so C3 says inform the complainant and the respondent in writing of the results of the investigation. So again, that's not like a casual phone call. That is like a full write-up of the report mailed home to the families and sent. And if there are 2 parties involved, there's actually a note in here where both have to be simultaneously notified. It's like you have to coordinate it so they both get notified at the same time. Like these rules are, I will say, like excessively explicit. Like this is very, very detailed that the federal government, and these are all federal government requirements. If you go to page 6 of 14, Roman numeral 3, so this deals with sexual harassment, a lot of similarities. But again, if you move down to sort of some immediate actions that you might take, if you look at 3A, again, there are examples of a no contact order or changing classes. None of that can happen without parents being involved, and would not happen without parents being involved. So that, again, that's just like an example. If you go to page 7 of 14, number 6, it says any student or parent who believes they've been the victim of sexual harassment is encouraged to utilize the school unit's complaint procedure. Parents and their guardians are hereby notified that they have the right. So that "and" is very clear. Like, it's not a, if we want to notify the parents, it's an "and." If the student is notified and the parents are notified. And then number 7 is, again, that check and balance. I have to be informed of all reports and formal complaints so that I can make sure that the process is followed, and that Heidi, as the affirmative action officer and Title IX coordinator, is doing all those notifications. If you turn to page 8 of 14, number 5, if a complaint is dismissed. So if a complaint is filed and through the investigation or the Title IX coordinator determines that it doesn't fit under this policy, all the parties have to be notified. So you have to tell students and their families that this complaint does not follow under this procedure. So and then I need to be aware of that to make sure that that's accurate and meets the law. Again, there's mandated reporter information in here. So like, under emergency removal or administrative leave. So God forbid this would ever involve an employee like that, you know, details what we are obligated to do in terms of that employee who's been accused, but also examples such as a threat of violence, self-harm, anything like those are all mandated reporter things that we would need to take immediate action on and would need to inform families of. And then B, under that, the respondent, so the accused party and their parent, legal guardian, are provided a notice of that emergency removal. So if we should have to say, like, this situation is so volatile and so potentially dangerous that you, the person who's accused, have to be suspended or whatever may happen, obviously that is something we would have to notify parents on. If we turn to page 9 of 14, D, notice to parties of formal complaint. Number 1, this entire section with those bullets is sort of like a point by point of what needs to be in the written notice of the formal complaint, with very explicit directions for the Title IX coordinator. All of that would need to be spelled out in parental notification. We can't provide that to a minor who wouldn't know that what they're consenting to or not consenting to. So that really absolutely requires parents to be notified in this very detailed letter. If you go to the informal resolution process, I have to agree to that informal resolution. So that first paragraph talks about the opportunity for an informal resolution, provide some suggestions, and then I have to agree to that informal resolution so that I feel like whoever is involved, that it's safe, that it meets the needs of students, that, you know, that the process is being followed. So again, that check and balance of that. If you turn to page 10 of 14, in the investigation, so the affirmative action officer and Title IX coordinator would assign an investigator. And that investigator has to consult with the Title IX coordinator. So there's a check and balance there. They can't just do their own thing without that guidance. And then the investigator, it's like very, very clear. Like, you will meet with each party after they've received appropriate notice of the meeting. All parties will have their advisor. So students in this process are allowed to have an advisor with them, which could be a lawyer if they so choose. It's very clearly outlined there. So I think I could keep going, but this policy is so different from the drug and alcohol policy because it is so specific to what we need to do and what our obligations are, that parental notification and that check and balance that you were talking about is really baked in the entire thing. So I appreciate the opportunity to sort of like go back, because I knew there was that part of it, but going back and being really detailed in it was a good exercise for both Teresa and I. And then with the committee, I think it was helpful for me to sort of go through that and try to find what I knew was already there, but couldn't necessarily come up with in a quick response. So.
Thank you, Carrie. Very thorough.
Thank you.
I believe a very similar presentation was provided to the CFP policy.
Yeah.
Did the policy committee during their reconsideration and evaluation of this take any further actions at the meeting?
Nope, it was voted on 2-1
I think so, yeah.
to send it forward in the form that you see in front of you right now.
Okay, so it was a 2-1, send it forward, vote. Anyone have any questions or further discussion around this? Go ahead, Anthony.
So I just wanted to say that I having probably read this about 15 times now, I think that, you know, my concerns about having multiple layers are addressed. I think the superintendent did a good job of explaining that at the committee meeting. So I'm confident that this really does serve all parties and keep people informed in a proper way with some checks and balances so that there is a safety valve should somebody say, I don't think this meets these criteria. Somebody else, the superintendent, was able to say, I think maybe we ought to have a second look at that. So and that's why.
Very good. Anyone else? Any thoughts? Okay, hearing none, I think we can move this to a vote. Again, this is to approve the second reading of the curriculum policy. We recommended revised policy ACAA, harassment and sexual harassment of students, and regulations ACAAR, student discrimination, harassment, and Title IX, sexual harassment complaint procedures. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Moving on to new business, we have item 10.1, which Teresa has been just saving her words for this, so I'm looking forward to it. Go ahead, Teresa, the floor is yours.
Okay, so good evening, everyone, and I have a presentation that is being shown on the wall, the TV, behind a few of you, so I'll give you a moment to turn around. All right, so tonight's presentation is a curriculum development update for our district. And hopefully, there we go. So I wanted to give you a little bit of historical perspective, and this is really where we started. I came into the position of assistant superintendent in 2017. I started full-time, well, I was also still principal at Turner Primary School, so there were 2 or 3 months that I was doing 2 jobs. So, but in the 2017-18 year is where I started. And these are the standards that were last approved by the school board. You can see the science and technology are the ones that are more recent. The other ones are older. That is not to say that our teachers have not been teaching current standards, but the entire process that we're undertaking now with a board approval, these are the dates. So I thought it would be good to give everyone really a context of what, when I started in this position, really where we were. So here's a timeline of the curriculum development in the 18-19 school year. We had a focus on English language arts, particularly with writing at the elementary level. And this was more of an elementary focus. I would say the high school in particular was working on their content standards, as has been a process that they've had in place for many years. In 2019 and 20, we were working on math, social studies, and science. You might remember that in March of 2020, our school closed for the remainder of the year, and then we were in a hybrid model for 2021. When students came back during the 21-22 school year, we still kept our school-based professional development. We were trying not to gather all of our staff in large spaces at that time. So most of the work was being led by the principals in their schools. And then last year and this year, we've really been working on all content areas. And I'm going to explain in a little bit, in just a few minutes, what that work really looks like. because it varies depending on the grade levels. And now we have our guiding document, the strategic plan that the board adopted several meetings ago for 2024 to 2028. And this gives us a really clear roadmap as to what we must do and what we will do. It gives us specific years, talks about specific content areas. And one of the pieces that I feel is critical for this work is to have a regular review and revision process, because if we don't have that, I don't believe that we'll be able to uphold all the work that we're doing right now. So that's really critical. I also wanted to point out that the strategic plan notes that we'll have an internal common assessment system, and then we'll be able to inventory educational opportunities for students to accelerate and make any recommendations based on that inventory. So that's a little reflection on the strategic plan. Also, we need to consider the Maine Department of Education standards review. And so this is really complex and I could do a whole presentation on it. So I just tried to put it into a simpler format. There are multiple steps. There are actually 13 steps. And it includes steering committees, writing committees, 2 public comment periods, 2 public hearings, and then the Maine state legislature does the final adoption. The Maine Department of Ed is involved throughout the process. And several of our teachers have actually participated as members of the steering or writing committees over the past several years. The 3 that come to mind to me are Iva Damon, Caroline Labrie, Cheryl Woodard. And so this process is really a 5-year process. And if there is interest, I can do my best to explain it, or I can send you some links if that would be helpful as to where to find this. But this is, the State Department of Ed already has what we need to have in place, a standards review committee, a standards review process rather. Ours, I don't think will necessarily need to have all of these elements, but that is what is happening at the state level. So I wanted to make sure I included that as well. And we cannot forget, these guiding questions are critical to our work. So when our teachers are looking at the Maine learning results, which have been adopted by the legislature, or the MELDs, which are the Maine, no, hold on, let me look at it, because I don't write it down. Okay, let me give it a go. Maine Early Learning and Development Standards. Yes, the MELDs. It's for pre-K students. We keep these questions in mind. So we know that we have the learning results, but we want to know, what do we expect our students to learn? How will we know how will we know if they're learning? That's where the assessment piece comes in. And then how will we respond if they don't learn? And then how will we respond if they already know it? So those are the questions that teachers keep in the back of their mind in this process. And some of you are familiar, I know the Curriculum and Policy Subcommittee had a presentation from Atlas. So in the spring of 2023, after input from teacher leaders and administrators, we had started this work, and we have a lot of Google Docs. And when I say a lot, I mean a lot. And Carrie and I were talking, and I just felt like the way that it was being managed, and everyone was doing the best they could, but if somebody left the district and someone else didn't have access, it got really complicated. So we had presentations for teacher leaders, administrators. We entered into a contract with Atlas, which is a curriculum platform. And during the spring, we put out information to the staff. I attended staff meetings so that all the staff would know that this was coming. And then in summer of 2023, the teacher leaders from all grade levels, all principals, Carrie and I spent 2 days in training around this process and training specifically to use Atlas. So on the left here, you see that Atlas is a curriculum platform. They do the leading of the platform. We do the leading of the process. So those bullets there just show those differences. All right, so these are our objectives. We will arrive with a pre-K to 12 vertically aligned curriculum in each content area that will have essential standards, learning targets, and essential questions. We will have common assessments that will measure students' mastery of these essential standards, and we will have a process for teacher teams to review and revise elements of the curriculum in order to meet student needs and changes implemented by the main DOE. Now, what does this look like right now? So at Leavitt Area High School, the networks have common prep time. And they are able to do this work during that time on half days and on district workshop days. And all of the networks have been working to select essential standards, learning targets, essential questions, and create common assessments. And the network leaders have been primarily responsible for entering the content into Atlas. So at Leavitt, it's my understanding that all the content areas have been worked on, and they're in varying stages because that's just where they are. But there is also information that has already been entered into Atlas. It's not finalized, but they've started that work. At Tripp Middle School, you'll remember this past year, content leaders it's a new role. They have led content meetings and they've worked to do the same work, but no one has been entering information into Atlas or have just minimally done it. They've really focused on getting their teams together under this new leadership as content leaders. And they also have, I will say at the middle school, they also have some team time, they have content time, they have times built in, not necessarily during the day, but they have a structure where all the teachers that teach are in the same building. And then we have our 4 elementary schools. So we have our pre-K to 2 school and then our 3 to 6 in Turner. And then we have Green and Leeds. These pre-K grade level teams have been able to work under the leadership of the grade level leaders to do the same work. The difference being there's not an internal structure that allows all 5th grade teachers to work together from 1 to 2 o'clock once a month. It's just not, because they're in 3 different towns and the schedules are not aligned. So these groups, the 4 elementary schools have worked together on full workshop days with the grade level leaders, assuming the responsibility to enter content into Atlas. We currently have pre-K to 6 science and social studies, and we have some ELA that has been entered at the elementary level. So that's really where everyone is for the content work, for the Atlas work, and where we need to go next. All right. So here's where we are today. I have been working with the principals to collect mid-year data on progress, and at some point I will have a nifty spreadsheet with all of the items checked off, so I'll know and the principals will know exactly where we are for each of the content areas. All grade levels and all content areas have been worked on in some capacity. I know our pre-K teachers have started working on ELA. They don't have items entered into Atlas yet, but I'm sure that's what they're going to be doing in the future. We have plans that are already underway for our March 15th workshop. And you'll remember we added 2 days to the end of the school year. So we have 2 June workshop days. And there is stipend funds set aside in a grant to help support summer work and stipends. So I know I have given you a lot of information, and so people may have questions or.
I'll say, you definitely tried to highlight when you're doing this work, but I guess my next question would be, do you think that's enough time? And is there anything that the board can do to help make sure this happens? Because I think everyone, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think we've identified it in other conversations that this curriculum development is certainly something we want to prioritize and make sure occurs. So is there anything the board can do to help this process along?
Looking at my other principals to see my other administrators. I mean, people always say more time, and more time is
something that we would have to give something up. I feel that given the conditions we have right now, we're in a good place. I think I would thank the board for supporting the strategic plan, because that really holds us accountable with deadlines that have not been held before. So I think just thank you for that. I mean,
And maybe you don't have to come up with something right now, but if something
Okay.
comes up.
Well, I have one thought.
okay, go.
So a lot of the summer work, and actually all of our professional development that we spend money on, is taken from title grants, which is our federal money that comes. It's not grants that we're writing up, like you've asked that question, Anthony. It's not grants that we're going after. These are grants that just come because of our student population from the federal government. And we have to balance what we spend from that money, so that we don't spend so much to supplement the budget that it takes away from the opportunities we have for all this work, which is paying people extra. So we're paying people extra in the summer to come in that we don't have to budget for in the budget. So it's just finding ways to make sure we don't overuse that title money to balance the budget, so that then there's not this professional development. And so that's part of our budget conversation that we'll be having. But I would say that is probably the biggest priority.
Right, because I feel as though we were quite lucky to be able to get 6 principals and you and I for 2 days during the summer, along with all the teacher leaders that were there. And if we can continue to do that, that is really helpful. And I think Carrie's right. Like, as long as we have that, I mean, because we spend probably between, I think last summer it was over $30,000 in stipends, but if that's not in a grant, and we don't, like, the money's never the same. You get, I mean, it's been within a range, but it's not always exactly the same. So I think that's important. It's just, there could kind of be a time that would be necessary. And stipends used to be in the district budget, but we pulled them out and they're now paid for with grants.
Wait, Tammy.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of go back to what you said sort of earlier on about the regular review and revision process. And what are you thinking that's going to kind of look like as far as getting the curriculum established and then kind of tweaking it and fine tuning it over, you know, the course of this plan, and then having it inform the next one?
I think I'm going to rely on my teacher leaders and administrators. I know that that's an end goal. What the details are, I don't really, I mean, I have some ideas I might suggest, but I think that's really going to be looking at, like I mentioned, there's opportunities at the high school, and they have really been doing this work. It just hasn't carried forward to a full pre-K to 12 vertically aligned. So I think we're going to need to look at our barriers, see how we can work with those, and establish something that makes sense for everyone.
Some of it will be dictated by the DOE when they review standards, and then we have to respond to that, right?
So it might behoove us to hop on their schedule if we can, like, really the push is on now, because science and social studies, the standards that we've been working on since 2019, is now under revision and they're being voted on. So do we halt everything else we're doing? And, you know, it's that balance. So there'll always be something that we'll need to do. And I think probably using those dates makes sense rather than just reinventing our own.
Think so?
So something that I heard a lot in the strategic planning committees was alignment of grading systems throughout the district. And so I wonder, while we're doing our curriculum work, are we also looking at how all our 5th grade teachers are grading and giving that information to parents? I think that's been.
So I would say that it's tied to it. Our common assessments are really leading to some conversations about how do we know what our students are doing, and how do we allow them to demonstrate that? How do we then score it? And there have been some conversations where staff are, we're going to do some more work on it in March, but I think about the definition of a common assessment isn't the same to everyone. So we have to decide on what that's going to be for us. And I know that the middle school is currently working on grading guides, and I know that is gonna be part of this work. I mean, towards the end. So I say it's an offshoot, but it's connected, definitely.
Yeah, that's essentially.
So could you talk a little bit about how, for lack of a better term, technology and sort of applied skill, training is being thought of as being taught simultaneously across the disciplines that we're teaching?
That's a great question. So the computer science committee has actually been looking at the curriculum and what elements really need to be more embedded into rather than being a standalone curriculum. So I think that what we're trying to do is see where we can make that happen and then how we can provide professional development if teachers are uncertain about how to do it. So we've been trying some of those projects, and at some point, I'd like to share with the board. I think I've talked a little bit about the Workforce Ready research grant the research project that I'm part of, but we also have some teachers that are part of that. And they've got some exciting news coming that Carrie's gonna be in a meeting with. I don't know if she knows yet, but so I think there's gonna be some additional supports, particularly to our district, who has been participating already for 2 years, for the next 6 years, that we could really get people in the field to help us do that, because some of that is not innate and natural for people. It feels like an add-on to some, and then it seems like, no, we don't want our kids in front of computers anymore. But the staff on the team, the teachers that are on the team have really been working to be in the schools, helping out others and kind of making that happen organically.
And I'm not suggesting that everything has to be computers. I mean, just building things out of wood is pretty great stuff, as we saw with the table.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's really heartening to hear that that's part of the conversation.
Yeah. And I think the strategic plan also lends itself to experiential opportunities. And so we need to consider those, and those will be built in.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Jamie?
I just want to say thank you. I love this stuff.
This night's for you, Tammy.
I love it too.
I will say best of luck, Teresa, and everyone involved as we move forward. So thank you. Moving on to item 10.2, we have the lead central school principal, Ms. Martash here.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got
You might as well just, yeah, because then I'm next.
Okay, so thank you. Good evening. Carrie made a good comment to me, and that's why I have the little running person in there. You said you really hit the ground running. My first 4 months have been eventful. I've not been bored 1 minute. We've had some unusual storms that we worked through, community tragedy, had a lockout, we've had teacher transitions. We even had 2 kittens come to school and baptized. Pumpkin and Spice. One came with a sister, one came with a brother. And they came to school with us.
I think my daughter was in that class. She didn't bring the kittens, but I heard about it.
That was an exciting thing to have.
Yes.
It was definitely, and I was holding a meeting with a parent with the kittens climbing all. It was a fun day. But I want to say, thank you for giving me this opportunity. And through all of it, I felt supported through. I text Teresa sometimes at 5 o'clock in the morning, and she's up and responding to me. So I really felt supported through all it, and I want to thank you. So as of right now, we have 198 students. We have 2 groups of pre-K kids split up. We have them coming 2 days a week. I have 2 kindergarten classrooms. I have 1 grade 1, not all 24 in there. Some of them are in a different program, so she's not in there with 24 kids. 1 grade 2. I have, we have a big bubble in our 3rd grade, so I have 1 classroom that is straight 3rd grade. I have 2 classrooms that are 3-4 multi-age. I have 2 classrooms that are 5th grade, and I have 1 classroom that is a 6th grade classroom. Our enrollment has kind of bounced around, so it's not too high, not too low. 198 is on the higher side, but no drastic jumps or falls in the trends. Our attendance data is, we're doing okay. I talked to Carrie earlier today, and our first quarter last year, we had 15.9% with chronic absenteeism. This year, our first quarter was 11.63. So our chronic absenteeism has dropped. The process that we're using for attendance is if a student is out for 3 days, a teacher gives a call and says, hey, you know, we're really missing Carrie in class, you know, making sure that there's nothing that we, or something that we can do to support them. If that keeps going, I send letters to those that are 10%, and it's 10% either excused or unexcused. That's the furthest I've gotten right now. I haven't done this month's data, but then we'll start reaching out to the families. Is there something that we can do to support you, you know, getting your student to school? Just trying to keep that attendance up. And we have each month, the classrooms get a gold, a silver award if they are meeting the 95% attendance award in those hang outside of their classrooms. Our school proudly supports the functional skills program. We have 12 students with various cognitive, physical challenges that need a curriculum that more focuses on their needs to become independent. I really like this picture. Our wonderful phys ed teacher that Carrie was talking about wanted to make sure that all of the kids could get outside. So she got a donated wheelchair. She took it home to her husband and had him mount skis on it. And she and her BHP that's with her were skiing down the hill at LCS, kind of like standing on the back so that they could slide, and she was using her heels as, you know, to kind of stop and steer for that student to go, and just lots of smiles and laughter. We have a great staff. Talked about my teachers. We share a lot of staff. 2 custodians that work so hard at that building. I see Chip out there all the time. Kids come in and he is right behind them sweeping it up. I've not been in a building that they've cleaned during the day. And we have Penny at night. We have 4 Title I staff that I'll talk about later. I couldn't do it all without Linda. She answers the phone. She's amazing. We have nurse, intern. We have, fortunately, some substitutes that I count on daily that are there almost every day. What I'm missing, especially after hearing that great instructional coach presentation last time, I'm missing an instructional coach. It's different here than in other districts that I've worked at. It is so much better here, and I really, really want one. And we also have a strong need for a school counselor, because we don't have one right now, and our sporadic person has left, and we're sharing a social worker. The picture in the bottom is the staff for our Halloween thing that the parent group organizes. So they all jump in. It was a very fun night. So I'm going to take you through the ABCs of Lead School. School goals are on academics, increasing our scores, behavior, kind of decreasing those undesirable behaviors by educating, and increasing the climate. These are all things that I heard pretty loud when I first started. I interviewed every teacher, every ed tech staff member that I could get and come to talk to me. And these are the trends that were coming up. The academic we're a school, we have to have the academic. But the behaviors and the climate were coming through on that. So I'm gonna hit a little bit on the ABCs of leads. Not doing this alone. I have a bunch of great teams. I have a PBIS team. It's made up of 3 classroom teachers, 2 specialists, special education teacher, ed techs, and a couple of parents. Anybody's welcome to come to that. I'm going to talk more about PBIS. I went there the first time, they're like, you have a BLT meeting. I thought I was getting BLTs. I haven't gotten it yet, but I do have a great building leadership team that has a representation from grade spans, ed techs, and specialists, and just a lot of people that just want to know what's going on. And we've made some great decisions, great ideas are coming forward. The big thing I found with this group is they want to know what I want, and they kind of get a little upset, well, not upset, but they don't really know what to do. And I said, well, what do you want? And it's kind of been a step back for some of them. It's like, okay, well, let's try this, because it's not all about me. PLCs, professional learning communities, grade spans, they have the opportunity to meet once a week. And I'm now funneling our Title I people in there to start sharing some data so that the teacher can see what's happening. So we're going to go into some A's. This is a change that we made shortly after finding out that our scores were not where we needed to be. We were tier 3, I think. It's either 3 or 1. It was not the good tier. That's and so we looked at how we were using our Title I staff. The previous model was we were just having the Title I staff push into some classrooms where we thought that there were some issues. I really like data. So we started looking, met with Teresa, met with the staff. We pulled up NWEA scores in math and literacy. We have a cool Delta math, and we have early bird now. So we took a look at the areas that kids were struggling in. So then we targeted those kids. So we're taking them out. We notified the parents, you know, hey, we've got your student, here's some things that you can do at home to help them out. And there's still, these happen in kind of 6-week cycles. And so we're still in one of those that should be ending soon, and hopefully we can see some results on those. But I don't have any between holidays and snow days and more snow days. But we should have some results from that soon. But I think we're going to see with targeting the kids that need it, that it will really help bring up those scores. PBIS. This has been something I've been working a lot on, and a comment that it was at the last meeting that I was at. I can't even remember if it was the last one you had or the last one I was at. But actually you had made a comment that made quite a bit of sense, or not said, something I wanted to talk about is that we've had PBIS forever. It's been around for like 20 years. Is it really working? The idea with PBIS is that you have to keep resurfacing it to the top. The school had PBIS, and if you don't keep bringing it back, COVID hit in, new staff members came in, new kids come through. So I'm taking it on because I want to keep bringing it back, because right now what we're doing at tier 1 is put big posters around the gym, and I gave teachers markers. What are the behaviors, the undesirable behaviors you're seeing in the hallway, in the classroom, the bathroom, in the cafeteria? And then we took those and turned them into what would be our expectations in each of those areas, that we would want the safe walking feet. And then we worked on it and made sure that we had some common language. Do we have some common language that our pre-Ks would understand, that our 6th grade? We had some that said, keep your body parts. 6th graders said, teachers said, no, we don't want to talk about body parts. So we talked about bubble space, and they're willing to take and use that word. We have ed techs, and they're like, okay, we can use bubble space. So stay, no popping anybody's bubble, stay in your own bubble space, trying to give everybody there. So coming up with that common language. Our next step, we're starting to look at SOPs. So when you come into the cafeteria, so we have the expectations. The SOPs are, here's how we want you to come in. We want you to go get this. And our expectations are that you will do this way. And then we will be teaching the kids explicitly, this is what we want. This is how we want this to happen. Everybody will have common language and be able to do that. Then we're just getting ready to start our tier 2. We have some kids that are kind of already at tier 2, but having kind of check-in, check-out system with a common trusted team member in the building. So how was your day? Okay, today you are going to do great. You are going to keep your hands to yourself, and checking in with them at the end of the day. And then the tier 3 kids are the ones that we kind of pull a team together. I've talked with Rebecca on a few of them. We pull a team together and we come up with a plan just for that small percentage of kids. but that's where we're kind of at, where we're going with it. It's exciting. I think they don't want to hear Matrix again for a couple more periods. So we're gonna take a break from that, and then we're gonna look at the SOPs. And we're also gonna bring the kids in. I had a great conversation with a group of young men struggling with sledding hill. And so we talked about expectations and some consequences. They wanted to ban 5th grade. They were 4th grade boys. And I said, what grade are you gonna be in next year? And then they decided to take that rule off. So including them in on it. And then I've also got a couple of students that if there's a loophole in one of our expectations or consequences, I know which ones already. I'm going to ask, come look at this and see if they can help me find those loopholes. Because they will. Climate, doing a lot with this. This was big when I came in. So we're doing some monthly assemblies. We had 2 already. The next one coming up is going to be around the 100th day of school. We've also got in March, our amazing phys ed teacher, not gym teacher, sorry. Phys ed teacher does the jump rope for heart. She's got a jump rope team coming in. We're going to do school-wide activity around Read Across America. I am looking for people to come in and read to kids. Hint, hint. I already signed you up. And we have a connection with Maine Mayhem, the football team, the women's football team. A few of them are going to come in. I have Miss Maine Scholarship coming in to read with them. She's been talking with me about setting up a potential challenge that I'm not going to talk about now. We'll talk about later. I'm going to try to get out of that one, but we're going to do that. She's a very fun young lady. Doing that, I also have a connection with like the Maine Celtics and trying to get some of them to come in to talk with some of my more competitive boys about sportsmanship and leadership. This morning, our BLT was around career fair, and boy, it was exciting because I want people to come in and talk with these kids and understand why we're in school. I want to have a range. We want to get in some firefighters. My daughter is an EMT. She's going to borrow an ambulance, hopefully legally. She's going to come in and talk. She said she could get one. I don't know how she's going to do that. But have the firefighters come in, have some of the people that work on the farms come in, have some doctors come in, and just talk to them in the kid language. And I'm really trying to push for touch a truck to get some trucks to come in just so that the kids can see them. Parent involvement kind of got cut off. I apologize. Starting to reach out a little bit more to parents. I put out a survey about our 6th grade celebration. I'm going to get some looking for more parents to come in to help us with our field day and ideas around that. And just doing a little appreciation of our teachers. They work hard. It's not always easy. Trying to do some fun stuff for them. I did an apple bar, which I just went and got some apples and some caramel and some stuff. And I had a teacher, like she had tears. She's like, nobody's ever done this for me. So it was really nice to have this. We do kind of a fun thing here and there to kind of show their appreciation. The picture up here is also, that kind of looks a little weird, but that is our glow party that our phys ed teacher does. She puts black lights in there, they wear shirts, and they just have fun and dance. Celebrating students has been everything for me. I have a bell. Linda still likes me, which is good. I have a bell outside of my office. This young lady comes down when she meets a goal. She comes down, we had to kind of do an adaptive so that she could reach it. But she comes down and rings that bell when she meets one of her goals. And everyone in the office hears as loud as possible. And we have a bunch of kids coming down now that the teachers are seeing that it's there. It doesn't matter to me how big the goal is, how small the goal is. The kids get to come down and ring that bell. And I make a fool out of myself celebrating. So, and Linda still likes me. This was a huge success. We have a popcorn machine at Leeds. And over in the corner, you can see one of my students, Chip, is assisting one of the students putting the popcorn machine together. This is his thing. He's going to put stuff together. Neither one of them wanted to use the manual. They in fact threw it out before I tried to get it back. But this is part of the PBIS in that we've got the expectations that we have in the cafeteria. We're reviewing them. And then the teachers kind of look for a table that has that great behavior, and they get awarded the Eagle. And then they also get a bag of popcorn. Teachers can also use the popcorn just to crunch on if they need a treat, or they can take and they can have their classroom earn it for something. You know, we had one class earned it, and actually Warren, or the student there, when he put it together, he earned it for his class and then brought everybody popcorn. So if you walk into Leeds, it smells like a movie theater. We had some pretty exciting stuff. I gotta find the notes on this one, but we have a Lego robotics that comes they meet after school. They competed last weekend. They are called the Screaming Legos. They wanted to have Screaming Goats, but they put Lego in there. They competed last Saturday in the main first Lego League Championship at Brewer. They scored well in all categories, but they did win for their Innovation Project Award, where they came up with setting up a free Lego library that they're going to house at the Turner Library. They finished 7th out of 25 teams, which is kind of exciting. Most of these are 4th graders, and this competition goes up and has up to 8th grade. So our 4th graders went and did a really good job. Couple of other quick brags. We have some after-school skiing going on. The one over there, his parents are going to thank us really well because he was really tired, but this just happened tonight. One of the teachers organized it. She's got a parent volunteer helping with her. And I just want to say thank you. That's pretty much any questions. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a lot.
Sorry.
Yeah. And you've only been here for a little while, so appreciate the thorough presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
I feel like I should because you put so much work into that. Great job.
Yeah, very engaging.
Yeah, my daughter came home very excited that they had earned popcorn, and I was like, "Oh, well, what did you guys do?" Well, they kind of give it to everyone today. Oh, okay, well, you can earn it next time.
So that's one of the things that we'll work on is that if you walk in, you'll be able to say, "Why did you get that?" So yeah, we're working on not just giving it to everybody. We're not making 200 bags. 198, sorry.
See that they just roll it into each classroom.
I have, but pretty much I keep it right in the office because then Linda and I can still do that, but we have gone into classrooms. I've had students come help me bag it, but I have to watch them. One of them scooped it and then licked it. Yeah. We had to go wash that and bag again, but but apparently I make good popcorn. One mom came in today and her son had missed it and he was very upset because I make good popcorn. So the next meeting it means I can make it.
Could you talk a little bit about one of the goals was to try to increase behavior or
decrease.
Well, I mean,
increase positive behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Could you talk a little bit about how you feel the structures that maybe you wish you had in place that might help things? Like, could you just talk about how that's working? If there are things that you believe that the school needs, if you're understaffed and you're still waiting for somebody, if that's something that might be factoring into behavior issues, it's on you.
Mostly just getting this PBIS into place and getting that common language so that if you were to walk out on the playground or if the students and the expectations for every teacher are the same. So no matter what teacher is outside on the playground with you, this is the expectation, and it hasn't been that way. This teacher lets you do this, this teacher doesn't let you do that. So it's just getting everybody using the same expectations and using the same language. But I don't want it to take away from the classroom teacher having their own system in there. So they'll still be able to do that, but there's some basic stuff, and that hasn't been in place. It was in place a while ago, but COVID and staff changes, it went away. So just getting that in place. And I think right now, the only thing that I need to work on is getting, we have a school-wide incentive. There's been talk, they want to bring back like a school store so that you've got some currency that you can earn for just doing a good thing and being a good kid. And it doesn't have to go above and beyond. And I want to make sure all the kids get recognized and you can save up the bucks or the coins or whatever it is, and you know, I don't want to have too much of the tchotchke stuff that ends up flying around, but, you know, some pencils that say leaves or some water bottles to kind of increase the pride in the school and in the community. So that's kind of what I'm looking for now, is trying to build that up.
Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you so much. All right. Speaking of climate.
Theme tonight is sit and get.
Yeah, another presentation here by Superintendent May.
So I will try, I tried to keep this, it can be overwhelming, but if you recall, and I gave you this information when we did sort of the state of the district back in August, sort of set up the strategic plan. The one thing that we're committed to doing is this full climate survey with students, staff, and families every year. We've settled on doing it in November, December around conferences. So we have a clear routine. We did it twice last year. In the spring, it was the least sort of like attended to. People sort of dropped off. So we're going to do it once, and that'll give us good data. So my goal tonight is to just give you a brief like highlight and area of growth for each school, just because last year you got these presentations, but that's because principals did them a little bit later. So principals have all done, with the exception of Shannon, have all done their presentation already, but we didn't have that data at that point. So I wanted to just give you that update of where we are with it. Just a couple things. We give it annually. The first time it was given was spring of 2022. The survey is personnel, families, and students. The students are only grades 3 through 12. It's a national survey that's brief, reliable, and valid for assessing perceived school climate. There are demographic questions asked on all surveys with options to opt out. And the elementary student survey is very brief with like a Likert score of like between never and always. I think there's 11 questions. Middle school and high school has a much more extensive survey, but it's that same 4 points from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And the demographics that students can opt in or opt out of identifying is identifying themselves by race, gender, sexual orientation, and those are all optional. Families can identify if their student has an IEP. I think also can identify if the family can identify as race, and then I think for staff, maybe just gender, can't remember. So it's not very, it's not as a lot. So individual school climate. So each school has its own variables. So I'm just saying this, I know you know this. Like Shannon is the perfect example for her to be giving her presentation tonight in terms of this, in terms of like each school's on its own journey, has had its own history. They have their own challenges and successes, and the goal is growth. Always in all those categories that families and staff and kids are telling us that they feel comfortable at school, that they feel people are caring for them. Basically, all of our data indicates there's growth since that spring of 2022 until the most recent December. So I'm just going to highlight at each school sort of what we're seeing. So in terms of the staff at the high school, and I got to follow along here because I've got some sample questions periodically. So in the category of adult peer relations, they have gone from 2.5 to 2.77. So that's a compilation of about 8 questions. I think there's about 8 questions in each category. Questions like students at my school get along well with each other. Students at my school treat each other fairly, regardless of race, ethnicity, or culture. There is a category in there of school safety, however, and I'm pointing out that even though the growth wasn't as big, the numbers, the score is a 3.57 out of 4, which is, we were talking about this the other day. Like if they're 3.5 or above, like we'll call it done, like win, like, because it's really hard to get above that when you're surveying, 50 or 60 staff members. The opportunity for growth, it's still above a 3. It went down a little bit. Structures for learning. One of the questions in that was teachers at my school have high standards for achievement. So they're not all on the same page around how they feel about that. It's down a little bit. So again, an opportunity for growth, but still it's above 3. So I think, they're doing okay. For families, school safety way up from 2.79 to 3.17. Questions like my student feels successful at school. My student's school sets clear rules for behavior. My student feels safe at school. Big growth for the high school. Another opportunity for growth, again, it's still an increase. I picked the one that grew the least, was a 2.73 to a 303, and that's students are treated fairly at my student school. The overall family survey score, however, for the high school is up from 2.86 to 3.12. So lots of growth there in terms of family perceptions of the school. In terms of students, some growth in the adult social support, some questions from that. And I will say, we all know, all the kids surveys, the growth is small, like across the district. They're pretty stingy in their praise. Just saying that out loud, it doesn't matter what school, it doesn't matter what grade level. Like, I would say any points you get as movement is good. But opportunity for growth, I picked, again, it's the least amount of growth, but still significant growth in terms of that school safety. I will say that the questions on this one section are opposite. So the higher the number, the worse it is. But it leads me to question whether or not kids recognize that change as they're answering, right? Because the middle school had the same sort of like increase in students saying they didn't feel safe, but that's not what we're seeing on the ground. So it's, I have questions about that, but it's pointed out as the place, you know, potential for growth. So the middle school, huge, peer adult for staff, peer adult relations, up a half a point. Students at my school demonstrate behaviors that allow teachers to teach. That's up like 0.6. Students at my school treat each other with respect. So it's a huge increase for the middle school. It reflects what Jana's been focusing on. This is her third year. Opportunity for growth, same category. They had one, it's the lowest. So even though they've had this huge growth, it's the lowest of all the categories from staff at a 3.2. But overall, the staff survey has gone up from 307 to 332. Which again represents a pretty dramatic increase for them in terms of how staff are feeling about their work. In terms of families, institutional environment, so those questions have to do with my student's school building is well maintained. Teachers keep the classrooms clean, like half a point up on that one. An opportunity for growth. Again, there was still growth there, but it was the lowest. Was interpersonal relationships, which is I feel comfortable talking to teachers at my student school, staff at my student school communicate well with parents. So even though it's their lowest score, it's a pretty dramatic increase in terms of how families feel about that. Overall, the family survey is up pretty dramatically, an overall score from the spring of 2022, with, you know, from a 2.9 to a 3.2. For students, dramatic increase in their reporting around social support. Those questions include things like teachers treat me with respect, teachers treat all students fairly. Opportunity for growth, again, it's improved, but it's their lowest score is cultural acceptance. So students treat one another fairly. Students show respect to other students regardless of their academic ability. So it's improved, but it's still low for compared to other parts of that survey. Green, GISM, school safety, 3.7 to 365. Questions like, so these are staff ones. Staff, if I report unsafe or dangerous behaviors, I can be sure the problem will be taken care of. That was one of the most significant increases in the perception of the staff at Green. An opportunity for growth, again, it improved, but it improved the least of all the areas is the peer adult relationships. One of the questions in there is students at my school treat other students fairly, regardless of race, ethnicity, or culture. Sort of the least amount of growth there, but still improvement. Families, teaching and learning up from 3.13 to a 3.58. One of the questions in that one is teachers at my student school promote academic success for all students. Parental involvement, opportunity for growth, again, it improved, but it's the lowest score they had. But the overall family survey at Green went from a 309 to a 348. So it's really some tremendous work there in terms of building partnerships with families. Students, again, super stingy. However, there's only 11 questions. So in this one, I just pulled out the questions. So the question with the most growth was the one, I feel like I do well in school. The overall score was a 2.76 2 years ago. It's a 302 now. Where things went down, students treat each other well. that reflects what teachers said. It reflects what parents have said. You know, that's a struggle in all of our buildings, and the kids are reflecting that and recognizing that as well. At Leeds, physical environment. So it's interesting. It's really sort of the oldest building. And if you take a tour of the basement, I was surprised to see this, but I think you have probably the highest functioning custodial team in the district. Chip is like so dedicated to that building. So I think that's a reflection of the personal responsibility that they really feel like they have for that building. So I think that's really amazing. The staff connectedness is an opportunity for growth around school safety. From staff, students at my school get along well with other students at my school, demonstrate behaviors that allow teachers to teach. This is no surprise that the staff is reporting that. However, I would still like to note that that's almost a 3.5. So even though it's down, it's close to sort of when we would think that we might not be able to get much better. So that's still good. For families, interpersonal relationships is where the most growth was found. Teachers at my students treat all students with respect. School safety dropped. Again, nothing that we're surprised about. It's what Shannon is addressing right now. I think a reminder that Shannon was on the job for a month, I think, about 6 weeks when the survey was given. So I think it will be fun to see that growth in the next year once things are put in place. And the overall family survey number just sort of stayed flat. It's 308, 308. So in terms of students, teachers' treatment and respect is up pretty significantly. You are not surprised to know that students report that they're feeling like they're not being recognized for good behavior. Like that score dropped. That good behavior gets noticed at my school. Again, not surprising and high on Shannon's radar in terms of school climate. At Turner Elementary, parental involvement is their highest growth in terms of what the staff report. Parents at this school frequently attend school activities. It's a pretty big growth. I think all of us sort of coming out of the pandemic, we're building back up to that. So it's a huge improvement. And then the physical environment, it's still 3, but it's their lowest one. So I marked it as an opportunity for growth. In terms of the family survey, pretty dramatic improvement in school safety. Questions like, my students' schools set clear rules for behavior. This survey overall increased 0.87, which is pretty huge. My student feels safe at school. This is a family report. Schools are consistently enforced at my school. So really, really nice improvement there and really strong work by the staff. Parental involvement, the opportunity for growth, it hasn't moved a ton. But the family survey, I do want to just point that out, that huge growth and that huge growth in that one question that families answered, my student feels safe at school, went from a 3.52 to a 3.22. So that is really significant in terms of hearing from families. The students, they like school more. It's up from a 2.4 to a 2.9, but this highest score, 3.8, my school wants me to do well. Like that is almost universal for 5th and 6th graders. And I'm just going to say that's really something because you can't buy a high score from a 5th and 6th grader. And then the opportunity for growth, good behavior gets noticed at my school. It's up. It's just the lowest sort of growth that we saw. So that's why it was identified as an opportunity for growth. And then finally, we have our primary school staff, the physical environment, which is a huge improvement from 376. So my school, the building is well maintained. Teachers make an effort to keep the facility. The structure of learning overall from staff, that overall score is a 3.62. So even though it wasn't the most growth, I wanted to point out that it's a very high score in terms of how staff feel about how they're going about the teaching and learning process. Also wanted to point out a significant improvement in the if I report unsafe or dangerous behaviors. So between March of 22 and now, up from 2.33 to a 3. So another significant improvement. Opportunity for growth is the peer adult relationships. Students at my school demonstrate behaviors that allow teachers to teach and students to learn. Not surprising that that's got the least amount of growth on it. I think that's pretty consistent. And then for families, So family scores are pretty high. Interpersonal relationships, teachers that my students treat all students with respect. My student feels successful at school. That's up from a 3.4 through a 3.6. Parental involvement is up. Opportunity for growth. I will say the one funky thing about the Turney primary survey was we had to, if you recall, we had a gas smell in the building and had to cancel conferences that day, which is when we target this. So they actually had the least number of parents participate. And I think it was because of that. They had to sort of drip out. But overall, that family survey is up from a 3.37 to a 3.56 for an overall score. So still represents really good, strong growth in terms of family perceptions of the school. And we don't do a student survey at the primary school. So just overall trends, more parents participate in the survey. When I looked at each building, the number of parents who took the survey in March of 2022, and the number of parents who took the survey in November, with the exception of Turner Primary, a great increase in all. So I feel like we're getting more parents, which and the perceptions are going up, which tells me it feels like it's more real, like versus if if we had parents just weren't doing it, we would sort of have a hard time. Saw universal growth in all schools in all parts of the climate survey. And it's just great data to really be able to monitor and create school goals. Really a good process to keep consistent so we can keep going back to it and have that baseline for ourselves. That's it.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Carrie. Lots of data there, lots of perspectives on the various schools. You mentioned we decided to do this starting in 2022. I think that was before you were here.
Correct.
It was also before I was on the board as well. I'm actually curious, folks that were here, I think it's great. I'm just wondering if there's any history in what triggered the start of this. And
I think it was, there was some questioning about bullying.
Yeah.
We brought up a climate survey to staff, parents and students, and that was where it took off.
That's my understanding of it.
Proven fruitful.
Yeah, no, it seems like it's solid data to be targeting, different programs too. Yeah. Anyone else?
So, congratulations. I think the scores are really good. I do have some questions about some of the questions. I've received this survey 3 times, and 3 times I'm told, it sort of is going to talk about survey is going to try to gauge parental involvement and ideas about safety and cleanliness of the school and professionalism of the staff. And then I'm asked a question that really, really sets me off, which is, what is my ethnicity? So what are we doing with the data about parents' ethnicity to help inform the data that we just saw up there?
So I think anytime you're looking at student perceptions, family perceptions, looking at subgroups that may be minorities within the community, sort of what their perception of the school is compared to, the sort of average overall can be informative because we live in white rural Maine. And so making sure that we're not losing sight of students who may be experiencing the schools differently. That would be true whether the students are boys or girls, whether they identify as gay or lesbian, whether they have, I think another question parents are asked is if their child has an IEP. So do parents whose children have disabilities experience the school in the same way? So the survey produces that subgroup data. And sometimes it's too small, like it's hard to make a judgment, with just a very small number. But I think it is informative to sort of be aware that it may look different to different groups of people.
So my second thought about this is not just the fact that we're asking these questions, but how the question is asked. So for instance, with ethnicity, 3 times, the choice is, are you Hispanic or are you not Hispanic? And this is an unconscionable way to ask that question. Why them? Why do they get pole position? Why not the Wabanaki?
Well, that question shows up on just about every federal form I've ever seen. And I think that this is.
These are identified subgroups, like these are subgroups that have certain protected legal, obligations. If you're a student with disability, like they're the same groups that we look at already.
But also, I don't think we crafted these questions. So these questions came from,
Yes, it's the PBIS. So we connect with PBIS and they produce this survey that's used nationally. And so I think it's important to make sure it's a survey that we can know has been vetted in other areas, that it's not something that we've invented. So we might, without even recognizing it, stumble into data that may not be very reliable because we've asked a question a certain way, right? Those are sort of statistical, mathematical scenarios that you want to make sure that what you're asking and how you're asking it gives you data that you can count on.
Right.
Just one more point. The PBIS system even processes the data for us as well?
It's not really a process, they produce it. The reports are not really that useful, honestly. It's just the number. And I actually had to do a lot of data input to be able to see comparisons because it doesn't do that for you. That's annoying.
So I'm just making this point because it's not like district staff has crafted this survey. We're essentially using the PBIS standard and they're even processing it and giving us the data back.
Correct.
Right.
So
I get that. But I also understand that there is all too much stuff that is foisted upon people, foisted upon customers. We are customers. We are using this product that this company made. And this company clearly has some kind of an agenda, whether it's aligned with what the federal government chooses to believe is permissible or not. That just doesn't fly with me. I do not think of my ethnicity in terms of what it isn't. It's not a lot of things. It would be really cumbersome for me to think about the ethnicity that I was born. I have nothing to do with my ethnicity. It's something that I inherited from my parents and forebears, and to have it reduced to I'm not Hispanic, and I've got nothing against that particular ethnic group. But I suggest that there should be some way to communicate with this company where we can tell them that's just not a cool way to ask that question. People don't want to be a write-in, an other. If they're gonna have a list, have it be a comprehensive list. And if they're not gonna do that, have it all be right.
Okay. Yes, Peter.
We saw, I assume, because you did and I thank you for the report on it and so forth, but is the whole report available for us to see? Years past, we used to get this report, able to see all the different questions, because I'm curious what all the questions are, those of us, so.
If you want just the questions themselves, I can send that to you as an attachment.
Well, absolutely, that would be, I'm curious what the questions are and so forth. Also, sometimes over the years, we've looked at, it was different in my time, years ago, a different report we did for culture, but we were able to see the whole report and then come back with our own questions to you about what this was. Also, when you mentioned the subgroups, we saw a general, this is what it looks like. Did you notice any sort of change at all with any of the subgroups?
So I didn't spend as much time with those subgroups just because I was processing it for this. I would not trust my memory. I do remember noticing one or two, but I would hesitate to say out loud. without checking to make sure that I had what I had right.
I just was curious, especially some of the larger subgroups we have. If they're feeling or seeing a different view than the majority of the people.
Yep. Great. So I will send the questions out.
I would be curious to see the questions.
And I will say that I crunched it. Last year when the schools did their report, you saw a lot more information. I thought that'd be a lot for tonight for all the schools, but I'm happy to send whatever people want to see.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you had percentages, like 50% of students or 50% of families at Turner Elementary School filled it out, or like did we?
At the number of families who filled it out. So not a percentage. And I don't know, I don't know like how many kids that represent, like how many families, because if a family has 2 kids in a school, right, then it seems like a lower number, but it actually covers a couple kids. So I just have the number of families who took it.
Curious.
I just wanted to say that I thought it was interesting that the areas of the opportunities for growth that came up in the survey really kind of informed your presentations, all the admins. So I can tell that they're already taking this data and using it to, positively impact their schools when they're taking that growth. And I just find it intriguing that like the data is now informing our practices, and that's what we've been saying as a board for a while. So thank you.
It was reinforced in the strategic plan too. So
I know. And I'm just saying we're on the right trajectory.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Anyone else? I'll just add, I really think it's great to also keep the timing regular too. So this review time, participation, and hopefully reporting around this time of year in our board week. So that's great. All right. See where we are here. Oh, we are now moving on to our discussion of our budget preparation schedule and process. So just a little bit of content there, but hopefully this is an overview. Okay.
Thought it was a good time to bring this back out. So you guys approved this, I think, back in November, I want to say. It's gonna get busy. So I just thought I'd remind you of the busy that's coming our way. So Gabby and I have met with every single principal and director. We have gone through the ED 279 that I shared with you, and ed leadership came, and then we've gone back to directors, and then ed leadership team was together this week to look at where we are and talk about next steps. So obviously our budget books will be ready for you guys on the 29th. On that night, I'll do an overview of the budget with some highlights and areas maybe that we're not going to be able to address in this budget. The principals and directors will provide the executive summary, just a quick hit of like some of the things that are different or changed or not in their budgets. And then that really will be it for that meeting, because then you will have time to digest that information as we get into the presentations. And so what you see here is the list of the warrant articles that are going to come before you. So just as a reminder, regular instruction really covers all the schools. That's where you're going to see the classroom stuff that's happening in every building. Special education will be across the district. Those are big ones. That's where most of our money is, right? Because most of our money is spent in the schools with the adults that are working with students. And then we will come back on the 14th. We'll review Article 1 and 2. I think what will be so important for us on the administrative side is between these meetings, as we present and share and you guys get a chance to ask questions, and then we have this time to come back to those articles again, that if there's questions in between, we want to make sure we gather as much information, whatever you need to make sure that you understand the budget. So if you know those questions going into it, and email or call, so it gives Gabby and I and the principals or whoever a chance to pull it together so that you have those answers at the next meeting. That will be really, really important, because we want to make sure that you've got what you need so that you feel comfortable and confident in what we've put together and whether or not you feel like you can support that. So just keeping track of that there are multiple meetings happening that whole month. With April 4th is really going to be a hard deadline for approving a budget on our end, because it does require a timeline to sort of print budget books and get those out to people. There is March 28th is sort of like a placeholder if we need to do an additional workshop, because we're still unresolved. I will say March 28th is also the date that we will know the maximum insurance increase. So it comes late. Last year, if you recall, we budget for 10%. We did the same last year. March 28th came in. It was 6% was going to be the maximum, but we don't hear the actual number for us until actually probably after April 4th. Yeah, so that's the tricky part, right?
I think it's April 1st that we get the maximum.
Okay. Well, I thought it was March 28th. Okay.
I think maybe it depends on what day of the week that falls on.
So we'll have that number for April 4th, but I think, you know, if we get under that and can reduce it even more in terms of what we're sending to voters, then I think we'll try to do that. And then the district budget meeting is May 2nd. There is no school board meeting after that, because we did 2 meetings last year and that was a lot.
Is that at 6 or 6:30?
I don't have that time in front of me. It'll be on the.
Yeah, it's on this.
Is it on?
Yeah,
It's on the other.
It's on the other schedule, yeah.
I think it's 6 o'clock. Yeah, 6 o'clock in March. Is that what she asked?
No, May 2nd, May 2nd.
I'm sorry.
I have 6.
No, it says, 6 o'clock.
The district budget meeting.
Yeah.
And then the vote is in the towns on the 16th. So that's all I wanted to do.
Great. Anyone have questions on that? Lots of fun coming our way.
Can you make cookies?
I'm sorry, but I'm gonna be with my grandchildren on that day.
That's
Oh, you're talking about all the other days.
Yeah, all the other days. All the other days, yeah.
All right. Well, the next item on our agenda is an executive session. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's here. Great presentations tonight. Really, really great stuff. But moving forward here, I'll take a request for an executive session to discuss the Tri-Town Education Association support staff negotiations pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056D. Is there a motion on the floor? Kyle, seconded by Crystal. All those in favor? It's unanimous.